You're used to thinking that the story of the Tower of Babel is just a fairy tale about human pride. People started building a high tower, and God simply confused their languages so they couldn't agree. But if you read the original Hebrew text without modern censorship, a chilling truth comes to light. Babel wasn't just a construction site. It was the moment the Creator officially disowned humanity and handed the entire planet over to the rule of other spiritual beings. To understand what really happened, we need to look at a verse that has puzzled translators for centuries. In the book of Deuteronomy chapter 32, the division of the world after the Babel catastrophe is described. Most modern translations read, "He set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel." Sounds logical? No. At the time of Babel, Israel did not yet exist. Jacob was not yet born, and Abraham was just an ordinary pagan from Ur of the Chaldeans. Only in 1947, when the oldest Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the Qumran caves, did scholars see the exact original of this verse. It reads, "He set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God," not humans, but the divine entities of the heavenly council. On that day, the Most High did what in ancient Near Eastern culture amounted to a cosmic divorce. He told humanity, "You don't want to listen to me? You want to build gateways to gods? So be it. I hand you over to them." The 70 nations of the ancient world were divided and assigned among 70 higher spirits. Thus, spiritual borders soaked in blood and sacrifices appeared on the map of the earth. Egypt received its guardians. Babylon received its own. Greece and Canaan received theirs. What we are used to considering pagan myths was in reality the geopolitics of the spiritual realm. Zeus, Marduk, Ra, Baal. These were not mere inventions of ancient peasants. They were real members of the divine council who received entire nations as their domain. But the Creator kept something special for himself. Verse 9 of chapter 32 states, "For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob." He disowned the old world and decided to create his own nation from scratch. That is why right after the catastrophe at Babel, the Bible sharply shifts its focus and begins the story of one man, Abraham. God calls him to leave Ur of the Chaldeans, out of a land belonging to foreign deities. This was the beginning of a special operation to reclaim the earth back. But the princes of this world were not going to give up their territories without a fight. Every ancient war was not merely a battle of flesh and blood armies. It was a clash of cosmic powers for control over earthly resources. When Egypt enslaved the Israelites, it wasn't just about economics. It was an attempt by the gods of Egypt to destroy the Creator's personal domain before it gained strength. Remember what God told Moses before the 10 plagues? "Against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment." Each plague doesn't just strike Pharaoh. It systematically destroys the authority of a specific spiritual prince. 3 days of darkness was a direct slap in the face to the sun god Ra. But why did the gods appointed as rulers over the nations turn into tyrants? Instead of guiding people toward truth, they demanded worship for themselves. They lusted for blood, human sacrifices, and absolute control. In the book of Psalms, there is one of the most surreal passages in the Bible, Psalm 82. It is a transcript of the Creator's secret trial over the rulers of the nations. The text begins, "God stands in the congregation of the mighty, he judges among the gods." Inventing such a concept in a monotheistic culture was simply impossible. The Creator was addressing those very sons of God to whom he gave the earth at Babel, and his rebuke is sharp. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the poor and fatherless? Do justice to the afflicted and needy? Instead, the pagan gods built a world based on slavery, violence, and fear. And then the supreme judge hands down their death sentence. In verse 6, he says, "I said, you are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. But you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes." Think about that. Spiritual beings clothed in immortality sentenced to human death. This means that a strict countdown was set for the reign of the pagan gods. Understanding this secret concept completely explains the geopolitics of the Old Testament. Have you ever wondered why Israelites were strictly forbidden to encroach on the lands of Edom or Moab? In Deuteronomy, God explicitly says, "Do not contend with them, for I will not give you any of their land." Why? Because those territories were legally deeded to other spirits. The land of Canaan, however, was where hybrid Nephilim clans nested, a grotesque distortion of creation. It was a military outpost of dark forces prepared to defend against the advancing kingdom of the Creator. That is why the war for Canaan was so total and uncompromising. It was the purging of fallen outposts. But the pagan gods were not going to surrender. They understood the main blow would come from within the only free nation. For centuries they corrupted Israel, forcing them to worship Baal, Asherah, and Moloch. Every act of betrayal by Israel against their God was a victory for the spiritual princes to reclaim global control. By the height of the Roman Empire, it seemed the Dark Council had permanently won the war. Rome united all ancient gods under its banner. The Pantheon became their central headquarters. The entire planet was divided into occult sectors sealed with the blood of empires. Humanity was under full spiritual occupation with no hope of liberation. And at that exact moment, in a remote province of Judea, something happened that the princes of this world were unprepared for. The creator of the universe himself appeared in the territory occupied by the rebels. But he didn't come as a radiant warrior with an army of angels. He came undercover, in the body of an ordinary man from Nazareth. The rebel gods didn't figure out this plan. Apostle Paul would later write astonishing words in his letter to the Corinthians. For had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. The spiritual rulers thought that by orchestrating Jesus' execution, they would permanently settle the question of the heir. They swallowed the bait and fell into the greatest legal trap in the history of the cosmos. By executing the sinless one, the forces of darkness violated the core law of the spiritual cosmos. The resurrection wasn't just a miracle, it was a legal act revoking the division of Babel. Immediately after the resurrection, Jesus stands on a mountain in Galilee and utters the words everyone knows. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Do you understand the legal depth of this statement? He is saying, the lease term for the princes has expired. Earth no longer belongs to the 70 spirits. All territory is returned under my rule. And immediately gives the command, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations. Make disciples of all nations, in the language of that time sounded like, invade the occupied sectors. Take back their people from the pagan gods. And the most astonishing event takes place on the day of Pentecost. Tongues of fire descend upon the disciples, and they begin speaking in different languages. The book of Acts lists the nations present: Parthians, Medes, residents of Mesopotamia, Egypt, Rome. It is a mirror image of the list of 70 nations from Babel. Where at Babel God divided the languages and handed people over to spirits, at Pentecost he unites languages to bring people back to himself. The curse of Babel was permanently broken. That is why during the first 300 years Christianity spread with unprecedented speed. It wasn't just a new religion, it was the collapse of the occupational regimes of the ancient gods. The shrines of Apollo, Zeus, and Baal emptied not because people became rational, but because the princes behind them were stripped of their legal authority. To fully understand how this secret architecture works, look at the book of Daniel. Daniel prays and fasts for 21 days, but the heavenly response is mysteriously delayed. Finally, a radiant angel comes to him and reveals the shocking truth behind the delay. He says, "The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. Think about that. This was not a human Persian king of flesh and blood. It was the dark spiritual ruler over the entire Persian Empire, a powerful prince from that same divine council that refused to submit to the Creator." And the angel continues, "And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." And then he adds, "I must return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I go, the prince of Greece will come." Ancient empires didn't replace one another simply by decisions of earthly generals. Behind the fall of Babylon, the rise of Persia, and the conquests of Alexander the Great were fierce battles of celestial beings in a dimension invisible to us. And that is precisely why Apostle Paul, centuries later, wrote the master formula of spiritual reality. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Fallen spirits cannot create, they can only parasite on human fears. They feed on hatred, ideologies, endless wars and chaos. Every large-scale tragedy of humanity is unwitting sacrificial oil poured onto their altars. But their time is inexorably running out. The law declared by the Creator in Psalm 82 has already entered its final effect. Michael Heiser emphasizes, the entire Bible is the story of the steady reclamation of earth. From the small family of Abraham in the desert to the global restoration of the lost Eden. The book of Revelation describes the final act of this long cosmic drama. When the invisible spiritual dimension permanently intersects with our physical world, the rebel gods of antiquity and their dark structures will be permanently stripped of power. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan. All 70 territories scattered at Babel will finally unite under one throne. There will be no more occupied sectors or purges, no more bloody altars nourished by human fear and pain. The boundaries drawn at the foot of the Tower of Babel will be burned to ashes. But until that moment arrives, 100%, every day of ours is a hidden battlefield. Where is your attention directed? What values and ideas are you giving your life energy to? Modern culture teaches us to be cynical, autonomous individuals who believe in nothing. But the illusion of absolute independence is the cleverest trick of the ancient masters. When a person rejects the Creator, they don't become free. They simply slip by default under the control of those very ancient archetypes. Those forces that for centuries lusted for the enslavement of the human spirit. That is why the ancient text says, "You were not redeemed with corruptible things, like silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot." This is no dry church metaphor. This is the legal buyout of your rights from the spiritual slavery of Babel. Now that you know the hidden context of Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 82, the Bible stops being a collection of children's fairy tales and fits into a single monolithic puzzle, a detailed chronicle of the liberation of the entire planet from the oppression of fallen higher beings. If this analysis opened up familiar text for you from a completely new perspective, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming episodes. Leave a comment below with your thoughts and reflections. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next investigation.